F1 Formula One. 5 Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
So Sergio Perez winning the third Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the second race of the season, just beating his teammate Max Verstappen by a little over 5 seconds in a race that everybody thought Verstappen would win from 15th on the grid. Certainly the podium seemed a foregone conclusion, and indeed it was. George Russell finishing in third in the end after a penalty for Fernando Alonso. Quite a lot to dissect, even if it wasn't necessarily the most thrilling Grand Prix in the history of time. Alongside me to do that, Alice Powell, British racing driver, and Andrew Benson, BBC's chief F1 writer. Alice, there always seemed to be something going on in that Grand Prix. I know that it won't go down as a classic, but I didn't think it was too bad, and there was always something.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think the issue is we've had 2 fantastic Grand Prix. They're previous, so it has a lot to live up to. Does this fantastic circuit, fast, flowing, produces some great overtaking. But no, there was always something going on. The battle, you could say it's a battle. It was sort of a battle between Verstappen and Perez once Max got up there behind Sergio. A bit slower than we all expected, and certainly a bit slower than what he expected to get up and break into the top 3. Obviously, he was aided by the safety car, but then you had the battle between Russell and Hamilton on the medium tyres in that last stint, and then some battles further down, into the last points paying position, as well as Piastri and his teammate Lando Norris battling at the rear end of the field. So there was always something going on. There was no drama this year. This circuit certainly produced plenty of drama, but certainly not this year.
Andrew Benson, to me, Sergio Perez's best F1 win, comfortably.
Well, I mean, I know what you're saying, Jack. I mean, I think you have to go some way to beat being last in his first win in the Sakir Grand Prix and coming through to win it in a Racing Point, was it called at the time? I think.
In the race where Verstappen and Leclerc both retired, and he managed to beat Esteban Ocon and Lance Stroll to the win. I was
going to come to that. Yes, obviously, that was a slightly different race. And obviously, the Mercedes were taken out there too. Russell with his puncture and all the rest of it. Be that as it may, I do take your point. To hold, I mean, what was impressive about it, I think what you're getting at, obviously, is that final stint. I think we all thought when the safety car came out, Perez had been 20 seconds in front of Perez had been 20 seconds in front of Verstappen. That brought the gap down to basically nothing, more or less. Perez made hay at the restart while Verstappen was stuck behind Alonso and Russell while he passed them, built a 5-second lead. And I'm sure you, Jack, certainly I, thought, well, 5 seconds, Max Verstappen, 20 laps to go, whatever it was, he's going to easily do it. But Perez more than had the measure of it. And what we don't know is how much Verstappen's pace might have been held up by, the issues that he was talking about in those closing laps, the noise from the drive shaft that he was talking about, the team sort of questioning him initially, and then him saying, no, really, there's a drive shaft problem. But it didn't really look like that at the beginning. We didn't hear any radio transmission or anything like that in the sort of for the vast majority of that stint. So on the face of it, you have to say that Perez was as quick as Verstappen today, and that doesn't happen very often.
His other one that gets lauded was the victory in the Singapore Grand Prix last year, which again was strong. He held off Charles Leclerc and did a good job, but it's Singapore where it's difficult to overtake, and Max Verstappen finished down in 7th a minute away. So again, he too wasn't in that fight. This is the first time for me that I've seen Perez, really properly beat Verstappen. Okay, look, he started on pole position and Verstappen started 15th. But as you alluded to, if Verstappen's 5 seconds back from Perez with half the race still to go, you think that move's coming, to be honest, based on the last few years?
Yeah, no, 100%, exactly. You definitely do. And Perez, maybe that's drifted in his mind at some point, but he certainly then chucked it quickly out because they were just swapping best lap times all the time. Perez would do a purple sector, then Max would respond, and so on, swapping fastest lap. But yeah, I think it's a good job by Perez because it's easy when you're a circuit like this to try and be consistent, as we did see the times sort of fluctuate a little bit from both drivers. but a great job to hold it there. And Max has just been so quick all weekend. You know, at one stage, I think in the last 3 practices, he was a good 0.6 quicker than his teammate. So, you know, he managed to end up matching him. Okay, Max, you know, didn't listen to the team and got fastest lap in the end to snatch the point for fastest lap. But, you know, he took it to his teammate and came out on top.
That fastest lap battle actually was quite a little bit of tastiness at the end, wasn't it? Because it said an awful lot about Verstappen's mindset. You know, he knew exactly what was at stake there. Perez had the fastest lap. He'd finished second in Bahrain behind Verstappen. So Verstappen was about to finish second behind Perez. Whoever got that was going to lead the championship heading into the Australian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. And Verstappen was absolutely definite that was going to be him. Now, just to keep this drive in perspective, yes, it's been great, but Perez was really good in Saudi Arabia last year. If you remember, he was really unlucky with the timing of the safety car in Jeddah in last year's race. That cost him first place. Who knows? Maybe he would have gone on to win that race if that hadn't happened. I don't think this is going to be the regular performance pattern that we see between the two Red Bull drivers. Maybe there's going to be the odd race where Perez is there or thereabouts with Verstappen, but by and large, I think we all know that Verstappen's going to be the dominant driver of those two. Why would it be any different from the last 2 years? So let's not get, I hope anyone's not getting too excited about there being a championship battle, because
I'm just trying to get the listener figures up. That's all I'm trying
realistically there's going to be.
But Benson, the start of last year has already been excused by the heavy car and the understeer, and now we're throwing, it was also just Perez specialist tracks at the start of the year last year too. Like, I don't know. I do agree that Verstappen is a lot better than Perez, but I was so impressed today, I think. And I really enjoyed that the moment in the race earlier Alice was talking about, where they were just doing fastest lap after fastest lap. The pair of them, personal best, pushing, both of them that's what I really like about motor racing, to be honest, without getting too, DRS passes, drive-bys aren't for me. I don't mind if people are 5 seconds apart, but both absolutely pushing, which they seem to be. They were going off at turn 22 because they were pushing so hard. I thought it was fairly entertaining stuff, but I'm an old-fashioned man.
No, but a circuit like this as well, typical street circuit, the concrete walls are right there. So if you do happen to have that little snap of oversteer, that little bit of understeer, 9 times out of 10 you are going into the wall at certain areas of a track like this. So it's a lot harder then to try and make sure you're pushing to the absolute limit, because there's a lot more risk involved at a track like this. And Perez, he took it to him. He took the risk out there to get the win, and was confident in his ability as well, clearly, to control the pace and respond to Verstappen. He would have known, because they've got radios, but they still have the pit boards out over the start-finish line, and they will always have the gap there. They are there just in case, let's say, that the radio communication doesn't work, but they'll always have the gap on it. So he was always aware of the distance of Verstappen behind him.
Let's hear from the race winner, Sergio Perez.
I'm really proud of the performance from the team. The guys have worked their ass off, and what they've done this weekend, it's impressive to see from the outside. So I'm really happy for them, first of all. I think really this victory goes to them, and just to Milton Keynes, they brought such a fantastic car, and the team. I love being part of Red Bull Racing, because the way we push, the way we deliver, everyone is working at the maximum. I mean, we are such at high level that people outside the team probably don't realize, but from Christian to everyone in this team is really delivering and operating at a very high level. So it's great to be part of.
And you made it look easy out there. So what do people not realize about what it's like to be in front? Was it difficult? Did you have any challenges?
It was going well. When I overtook Fernando, I thought I could do my race. But then the safety car again wanted to take the victory out of me in Jeddah, but not this time. And we managed to get a good distance with Max. We kept a healthy lead, and that went well.
Just last thing, you didn't go for the fastest lap. Was there a reason why not? You didn't want to risk it?
I was told to keep certain pace in the end, and it's something that we need to check, because I was told to keep the pace and not try anything.
So Sergio Perez winning the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, 5.3 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen, who set the fastest lap of the race on that last tour. Without the safety car, Verstappen, well, he's certainly not winning the Grand Prix because he didn't win it with it, but he was 22 seconds off the back of Perez. So without that safety car for Lance Stroll, I think the podium would have probably still been doable because he finished 15 seconds up the road from Fernando Alonso. So there's still no doubt after this that the rest of the competition is nowhere, really. Because there was a lot of hope, wasn't there, after Bahrain? Very wishful thinking hope, but isn't that what hope sometimes is? That maybe for this Grand Prix, straight line speed, less abrasive tarmac, all of these things, maybe Ferrari will be a little bit closer. Nothing really. Like Red Bull have got this championship, at least in the early stages, haven't they?
Yeah, they certainly have. And there was also talk of maybe the Aston Martin of Alonso really giving it to Perez, and that sort of quickly fizzled out, even though Alonso was on the radio saying, "Oh, I'm quite happy. These tyres are pretty good." But yeah, touching on Ferrari, though, that is a miserable day for them. I mean, it could go. We said in commentary, could be a lot worse. They didn't break down. One of their cars did break down in Bahrain, but they both finished the race. But 6th and 7th, that's just disappointing. And I think after testing in Bahrain, they were a bit more optimistic. But looking at it now, I mean, there's no optimism there at all.
I think they were still slightly not clear about the picture at Ferrari after this race because they thought they would be quicker in Jeddah than they were in Bahrain. That hasn't really proved to be the case. What we don't know is what the optimum finishing position of a Ferrari would have been, because I think Leclerc was pretty demonstrably quicker than Sainz through the race again. And we heard him talk on the radio about, it's not great being stuck back here. What he was saying in that radio message was, I'm quicker than Sainz, but I know you're not going to let me by because I'm probably not going to catch and pass the others before the end of the race. So for the sake of team harmony, you're not going to impose team orders to make Carlos let me by. But he thought he was quicker. So if he'd been given free rein to run at his absolute pace, where exactly would he have managed to be? Remember, he started second, or he would have started second without his penalty. Maybe he would have been able to race with the Alonso-Mercedes battle from the start. So in that case, maybe he would have finished third. We don't know at this stage. So maybe it's not as bleak as it looks just from that result. No,
it's an interesting theory. Leclerc finished 7.2 seconds behind Carlos Sainz. They both went onto the hard tyres at the same time. Sainz finished 5 seconds back from Hamilton and Russell. Now, I take your point. Does Leclerc have it in his locker to finish 5 seconds up the road from Sainz during a Grand Prix? Yes, is the sort of emphatic answer there. But to finish 7 seconds off the back of Sainz without ever really putting him under too much pressure feels a bit of a stretch to suggest that Leclerc was quicker.
Well, he was quicker in the first stint on the soft tyre compared to the medium. Now, you would say that the soft tyre is quicker than the medium, but it wasn't expected to be, and it was expected to grain, but he was still quicker nonetheless. And in the second stint, he was right behind him for a good few laps, and when he made that message, that was him obviously saying, I know you're not going to let me by. And I think what's happened there is he's just backed off. Up, Exactly. So, and of course, what I'm saying is, I think he had the pace to beat Sainz and be in that battle anyway, regardless of starting 12th. So if he'd actually started in what was his on merit position, which was second, I'm saying there's a strong chance, I think, that he would have had the pace to race with Alonso and Russell for that final podium place. Now, that's not where Ferrari wanted to be this season. They thought they'd made a big step forward with their car. They thought they were going to be competing at the front with Red Bull. Red Bull have made a much bigger step forward with their car. And so, yes, 2 races in, it's not great for Ferrari. All I'm trying to say, Jack, is that 6th and 7th it's painted a bit of a vulgar picture about their overall actual competitiveness.
Well, let's go back, shall we, quickly, and hear from Max Verstappen. He finished in second behind Sergio Perez, and he leads the championship, leaving Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I feel good. I mean, after starting 15, you try to do the best you can, and I think with or without safety car, I think that was second.
And you had a couple of issues there with the car we heard over the radio. Were they considerable? Did they cost you any pace?
Yeah, I mean, I was catching, and at one point I just started to feel really weird vibrations again on the right rear. And on throttle, in some corners, I started to get a weird balance. So at one point, I did the maths, and I was not going to catch anyway if I kept on pushing with the amount I was catching. So I said to myself, second is okay today, and we settled for that.
Plus, you took the fastest lap, so you must be really happy.
Well, really happy is a big thing. I mean, we started off the weekend really strong, and we don't win the race because of course, our issues. So there are still a lot of things we can do better.
So Ferrari finishing 6th and 7th, as we were just discussing, not necessarily in the fight, but maybe the picture not painted quite that way. Fernando Alonso, 3rd on the road, fairly comfortably 3rd, to be honest, but an odd day for Alonso. Got a great start, took the lead of the race, was loving life in the fight with Perez, lined up in his grid slot wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he said in his interview that's a mistake from me. Hands up. It
would have been a good one to try and blame someone else for that, wouldn't it? That would have been a good effort.
I mean, he's not started on the front row for a long time, so maybe just sort of forgotten and a bit of age there. Start memory wearing away. But usually you would, approaching, the grid slot, wherever you're starting, left or right-hand side, you would drive over the grid slots that are in front of you to help line up for your grid slot, because it is difficult to see. You're sat very low in the cars. There is a yellow line that spreads across from where you put your tyre, but he was in line with that, so that was fine, but he was just slightly too far to the left. So he obviously clearly didn't prepare enough and line the car up correctly, prior to entering his grid slot. So that was an error there, but also I thought that his safety car restart, he was just a little bit asleep.
Yeah.
He left the gap. Clearly he was expecting Perez to leave it maybe to the very last minute to go just before the green flag. But you need to be prepared for any event, because at the end of the day, you are not the one that's in control of that restart. It's the car in front. So Perez was weaving, to try and sort of distract and go, oh, am I going? Am I not going? And Alonso sort of a little bit fell for it, because he hung back, and then Perez clearly saw that and thought, well, I'm putting the hammer down now, and I'm off. So yeah, so there's two little errors there really from Alonso that we don't sort of expect to see from him.
No, and he had a nice fight with Perez and was kind of sticking with Perez in the early stages. Finished 15 seconds back from the two Red Bulls, but then had a 10-second penalty for not serving his penalty correctly. Seems as though, and at the moment we don't have any official word on exactly what the penalty was for. Well, it was for serving the penalty incorrectly, but you kind of think you saw it, Alice.
Yeah, it looked like that the rear jackman possibly put his rear jack underneath the car, potentially, and made contact with the car, made a connection in order to ready to lift the car up for the rear wheels to come off. So from that's what I feel that it was, because it didn't look like from any other angle that any other of the mechanics touched the car at all. That's the only thing I could possibly think it being.
Yeah, so Fernando Alonso ends up finishing 4th. So not a double podium, not his 100th podium. Andrew Benson. Oh.
Yeah, he'll definitely be annoyed with himself for that. But, I mean, look, he will be looking on the bright side. He led a race on merit, having qualified. Well, he qualified 3rd, but started 2nd. He held off a Red Bull for 4 laps. He was saying on Saturday, that he didn't have any expectations of being able to match the Red Bulls for pace, and because he's a realistic sort of guy, and that's the way it worked out. But he had the pace to beat everybody else, and that's the 2nd race in a row that's happened. So we're looking at Fernando Alonso potentially finishing 3rd in the championship if Aston Martin can keep that going, and there's no way they went into the season expecting to be that strong.
Can the team finish 2nd in the championship in the constructors?
Yeah, I think they can at the moment. I think obviously the threat for them is that you've got Mercedes, who are not far behind them on pace, and Toto Wolff, I'm sure we'll get on to Mercedes in a minute, but Mercedes team principal was saying yesterday that they're already finding big steps forward in the wind tunnel, having taken the decision to change their
you can't
development
fall for that
direction.
one again, surely, Andrew. Well, they told you this over the winter, that they found big steps forward and they were going to be running at the front.
I'm not sure they did, actually.
But they weren't expecting themselves to be in we can't trust their data, is my point, surely.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Well, we'll dig into that a bit more in a moment. But from Aston Martin's point of view, their concern is they're going to have to keep up the development race against Mercedes and Ferrari. But Alonso's talking about they've got 3 or 4 big updates coming. Aston Martin, they have a different development plan to others. Some teams bring things in dribs and drabs, one race after the other. They've got like 3 or 4 big packages at various stages through the season. But, for them, it's all positive at the moment for Aston Martin, even though their, 2-time world champion, most experienced driver in history, made a mistake. And then the team made another mistake, which is actually interesting. Aston Martin and Alpine, both normally pretty good on race operations. That's 2 races in a row where 2 teams have made different but similar penalty errors in the pits.
Well, let's hear from Alonso.
I feel good. I feel great. I mean, I enjoy the podium. Then, obviously, after the podium, apparently it could be a penalty, but I know the team is looking, to understand if that's the case or not. If that's the case, I think we finished 4th, so we lost 3 points from 15 to 12. But I think it doesn't change the feeling. The feeling of the car was very good. We were second fastest again, controlling the Mercedes and in front of Ferrari. So yeah, I feel super happy.
You're so happy. What do you think about the penalty, though? Do you think it was justified?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't see what was the penalty or anything like that. I know the team is trying to understand now. It feels strange that it took 1 hour, 35 laps to apply the penalty, and I was in the podium with all my sponsors, my team, and things like that, and just they decide after. So that's not very good job from them, but it's their problem.
Just last thing, your start was really good. Can you just take us through that? That must have been great.
Yeah, apparently I was too much on the left on the box, so that was my mistake. But yeah, it was good to lead the race at the beginning for 1 or 2 laps, to see the Aston Martin leading the field. And then, when they told me that I have 5 seconds, I said, okay, I need to drive a little bit faster and I need to make that time. So it's what I tried to do in the first stint. The car was very, very good to drive again. Then the safety car came, so we all took the opportunity to stop. And and then from that point onwards, it was just controlling the race.
What a chirpy, chatty man.
Yeah, he's still pretty happy, isn't he? He's lost his
he's loving
podium,
it.
but he's got a very valid point.
He doesn't care because he got to stand on the podium.
Yeah, but why did it take so long for them to make that decision?
Yeah.
I wonder whether some of the other team or another team, like Mercedes, maybe had a little look and said, hang on a second, see, there's an infringement there, and possibly put it forward to the FIA and say, can you have a look at this? Because... yeah, why did it? Otherwise, I would have thought it would be picked up straight away because the cameras were on him when he served that penalty. So, yeah, I have to agree with him. Well, why did it take so long for them to pick that out?
Yeah, it's things like that. I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if it were an opposition team that sort of saw that on the TV. And sort of protested it potentially because it was Russell was the first we knew of it, was Russell being told Alonso might have a penalty before we'd even known that the stewards had noted it. The way that the stewards work fundamentally is that things happen in chronological order. So it's just because something's an easy decision, they can't get that easy decision out the way if they are still looking into some other stuff that's going on or other incidents. But equally, I don't really recall any other incidents going on or any other stuff going on. So I always remember that Verstappen pole position that he lost in Mexico a few years ago when Bottas crashed and he set the time under yellow flags. They were like, well, yeah, but we had like 4 other things we had to do before we got to that. And that's why it came out 3 hours later. But still, that's not a defense of the stewards. I think it's not really a great way to go about it, but that would be potentially the reasoning there. So yeah, it was a bit silly that it took so long and George Russell didn't get to stand on the podium in 3rd place. We'll move on to Mercedes now then. Andrew, well, go. We've touched on it earlier on, and Mercedes now saying, oh yeah, we're finding loads of good stuff in the data after they got all their data wrong for the last 2 years. So why do we believe them now?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, they made big progress last year, Jack. Let's not forget. Having messed up the car at the beginning of 2021, they won a race, second last race of the year. Now, they've admitted that actually that was probably not the best thing that could have happened to them because it gave them more faith in that car concept.
False hope.
False hope, exactly. More faith than they probably should have had. And I think it sounds from, having listened to Toto Wolff over the winter and into Bahrain 2 weeks ago, that he had suspicions. Clearly, Hamilton had suspicions because he told us after the race in Bahrain they didn't listen to me. So he was obviously thinking this over the winter. But he actually said, when I saw the car come out, it looked the same as last year. He didn't feel that great about that. So they've now finally realised that this is the wrong development direction for them. They've changed it. They're talking about finding big gains in the wind tunnel already. It's a legitimate question to say, well, why didn't you find these gains before? Why didn't you pursue this direction? But the answer to that they would give, I think, is that, under the cost cap world, you can't just pursue two different development paths because you don't have the resource in terms of, both money and facilities, both personnel and research time, whether that be in the wind tunnel or on computers, to do such a thing. So they've changed tack. They're seeing these big developments coming, and they're talking about being in a position to win races by the end of the year.
Really?
Now they'll be factoring in there. Sounds a bit outlandish given their best part of a second a lap on average, slower than a Red Bull at the moment on race pace, as is everybody else actually. But they'll be factoring into that the fact that Red Bull's aero research is restricted because they were champions last year and they've got the budget cap penalty as well, the penalty for breaching the budget cap, I should say. So, for the sake of competition, let's hope they're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's hear from the two Mercedes drivers, starting with George Russell, who wasn't on the podium, but finished in third place. This is when he found out.
Get him off the podium now. I want to be on the podium. No, I don't know why Fernando got a penalty. At the end of the day, he I think, is the deserving guy to finish P3. So I'll take the trophy for sure, but Fernando and Aston deserve, the podium. So, yeah, as I said, that's a harsh penalty for Fernando. So, yeah, nothing more to say.
So that was George Russell finding out amidst the fireworks that he got a podium finish.
It did sound like he was in a fight somewhere, didn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't sound good.
No, exactly. Let's see whether Lewis Hamilton, who was a man of very few words yesterday, was he feeling any more chipper after the Grand Prix today?
Lewis, your race seemed to come alive on the medium tyres, is that right? And how do you feel now?
Yeah, struggled on the hards. Setup was wrong this weekend. So, but once I got onto the mediums, I was in a much better place.
And George's podium, you must be happy about that?
Well, it's nothing to do with me, but it's good for the team, sure.
One thing to learn is when Lewis has maybe not had a great result is to try and stay away from asking him any questions. But I think clearly he's going to be happy for the team. But still quite disappointment from his point. But I think not a bad race for Lewis, considering sort of the woes he had yesterday. Obviously he didn't have the pace to match George. I reckon if he was in front of George, he probably would have been a little bit happier. But still, he's not happy, is he?
Not saying it didn't happen, but we didn't hear any messages giving Hamilton the hurry up in order to sort of gain places from Fernando Alonso as well, because it would have been a 10-second time penalty for not serving the penalty correctly, because that's what it was for Ocon. So maybe he did get those messages and we didn't hear them. But in the end, he only finished 0.3 behind Alonso. Not that either Hamilton or Alonso are really going to lose too much sleep over whether they finished fourth or fifth.
No, exactly. And I think if Hamilton, to be fair to Hamilton, he sounded a bit monosyllabic in that interview, but I think he's never going to be happy with finishing where he did or with a performance from the car like it was. But I think if he'd been asked some slightly different questions in that interview, he might have been a bit more positive, because, he did have a much stronger race. He was challenging Russell after the safety car. Okay, that was because of a tyre advantage, but, racing drivers make mistakes on setup every now and again, and the Mercedes are in the fight for second place. Basically, is what it boils down to. Everyone's a long way behind Red Bull, and the Russells, Hamiltons, Leclercs, Alonsos of this world. They all want to be fighting for the world championship, ideally. But it's not all doom and gloom for Hamilton. I think when he comes back from this weekend, and thinks about those gains, assuming they are real, and assuming he's being told the same thing, I think he won't feel too bad.
Ocon finished 8th, Gasly finished 9th, Magnussen finished 10th. I'm going to do a shout out to Magnussen. Great move at the end on Tsunoda. He was good. And Tsunoda's a feisty racer as well. Those two wheel to wheel is good fun.
Tsunoda's one of those races you go, oh, I'm up against this guy again. I don't trust him. He's a bit wild, isn't he, sometimes, his old Yuki. But a great move, aggressive move for Magnussen. And once he did clear Yuki Tsunoda, he jumped off a little bit into the distance, cleared him, and immediately moved away. So yeah, it's a solid result for Magnussen.
Yeah, and we'll not too much really to look at out of the rest. The Piastri did well to beat Norris, but it felt like Norris had straight line speed issues because he couldn't get anywhere near Sargent or overtake Sargent. Bottas at one point said the car didn't feel very good. He finished last. Albon retired and Lance Stroll retired from the Grand Prix. So that leaves us with driver of the day. Tricky one today, I think. As a driver of the day, Alice Powell.
I'm going to go for Perez because everyone expected Max with the car underneath him to move through the field quite quickly, quite easily. A bit trickier for him than expected, but he certainly did that with help of the safety car. But Sergio, he held it there. You know, he knew Max was behind and he kept the pace up. So I'm going for Sergio.
Benson, Andrew, I tried to make you feel like you were on University Challenge then.
I'm going to go for Perez too. There's a few drivers did strong races, but he to hold off Verstappen, as Alice says, that's a really good effort.
So I'm going Sergio Perez as well, and I'm actually going to slightly. I don't think it was a race full of drivers who had a strong race, actually. Now I think about it, there's not actually that many contenders. Verstappen did fine to come through the field, but
he got beaten by Perez. You can't give it to Alonso because he got his penalty. The Mercedes drivers were fine, but nothing spectacular. Leclerc was quick, but he came through the field quite nicely, but he's finished in the end 7th. So hard to give someone 12th to 7th, a decent job, but it's not outstanding, is it? So, and the rest of it...
He was 9th at the end of the opening lap, I think.
Yeah, so, as you say, I think it can only be Perez.
Yeah, okay, fine. Perez, done. We will be back ahead of the Australian Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time with a preview show on the Thursday, I would imagine, before the Australian Grand Prix. And then, as ever, coverage across the weekend, every second live on the BBC Sport website and across 5 Live and the network. And we'll have podcasts post-qualifying and post-race. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Max Verstappen leaves Saudi Arabia, leading the championship by 1 point over Sergio Perez after a very impressive drive from the Mexican. See you in Australia.